All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Happy Friday. Thank you so
Morning.
much for tuning in to another episode of LearnBiz, the podcast. I am Sandy B here with the lovely Lisa K. Crawford. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, lovely Sandy B. Can you hear me okay?
I can now, yes.
Okay, great.
All right, guys. So today we decided to have a little conversation about the black dollar, and we're talking about intentional spending. It's said often that the black dollar clearly doesn't circulate within the black community, at least not to the extent that it does in other communities. And one of the issues with that is, we're always talking about growth in our community and positioning and us having power in our community, but you can't have power without the dollars. You have to have something behind behind you that will keep you sustained as a population. So it's extremely difficult for us to be able to talk about Black power, Black growth, Black legacy building without having Black dollars circulating within the community. Good
True.
morning, Doug. Thank you so much for tuning in to us
Good
this
morning,
morning.
Doug.
Definitely interested in your thoughts on this topic. So, Lisa, I'm going to
Yes.
shoot it to you because we're talking today about an article. It's a little bit older article, but
Yeah.
still pretty relevant today.
Yes, Sandy, I think that it is important that we keep our dollars in the Black community in order to have some type of legacy. I mean, how can we grow and develop if we don't keep our money in our communities? So the question is, what's the issue, and how do we keep those dollars in the community? I just think it's an important conversation. I think from the stats, that the African American communities keeps its dollars within its own communities the least longest time. You know what I mean? So there's an issue there. So it's definitely worth discussing.
All right, so let's take a look at this article.
All right.
So, this article basically says the black dollar doesn't circulate. So, Lisa's going to kind of walk us through this, but
Yes. So, again, this is from a couple years ago, and we're gonna go through. I can navigate this, or you're navigating it.
let me see if you can see it.
I can see it, but I'm not able.
All right, I'll go ahead and navigate it because I.
All right, so let me just read a little bit of the introduction of this article here, just to get the flavor of what we're talking about here. It says it's time to put your money where your mouth is. The racial wealth gap isn't going anywhere. In the wake of the pandemic and protests for racial and social justice, Black businesses continue to remain a fragile coterie in the eyes of the economy. The dollar in the Black community is inconsistent, and the racial wealth gap could take decades to bridge. The common recurring statistic in money circulation within communities, according to the NAACP and other organizations, suggests that the Black dollar is unregulated. Studies say that the average lifespan of the dollar is approximately 28 days in the Asian communities, 19 days in the Jewish communities, 17 days in the white communities, and just 6 hours in the Black communities. So, as you can see, these statistics have been largely argued over the years, but this is the issue. Why is the Black dollar only circulating for hours? It doesn't even stay within our communities a day. We're down to 6 hours. So therein lies the problem. And I just don't think we're discussing it enough. And we have to deal with this and understand what the problem is so we can fix it.
So, what I like that Doug is noting here is that, part of the challenge is supply chain. Um, where is there a black grocery store? Where is there a black processor? Where is there a black farmer? Where is there black farming equipment and supply? So having this conversation, there's so many different layers to it. It has to start somewhere, but the problem is where it needs to start hasn't really been identified because we're in short supply of all of the basics that would make for a fruitful economy. He
Right.
says we will have many one or two on the chain, like a black grocery store and maybe a black
Yeah.
farmer. And the less in the supply chain, the harder to circulate. So, it's not surprising that we're in this position. The question is, how do we get out of it?
Yes.
Doug also says, for example, my Asian restaurant clients will buy from an Asian food vendor. The Asian food vendor will buy from the Asia fisherman. And so this is particularly interesting to me because I look at communities as a whole and I think to myself, well, how about in my local community? In my local community, I can't think of a black owned, for example, beauty supply store. I can't think of a black owned nail salon. I can't
Okay.
think of a black owned
Hmm.
restaurant that is productive. When I say productive, I mean when you see growth within an industry,
Mm-hmm.
you see that they're expanding, they're growing, they're changing, they're upgrading. Um, I can't think of any black law firms that stand out. And so I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm saying black law firms that stand out, as in they are a neighborhood name. I can guarantee you right now, you and I both can roll down a long list of other law firms, right? A long list
Yeah.
of them. But
You're right, Sandy. And the one that comes to mind that would have really stood out against any other one had he lived would have been Mr. Johnny Cochran. The Cochran firm would have
right,
been one of those firms that would definitely have been nationalized probably by now had Mr. Cochran been living, and we
right.
would all would be at least be able to say the Cochran firm is alive and well. I'd like to think that.
I would. The only catch with that is he'd still be the only one. It's almost like, for every one that we can identify, there might be 100, 200, 300 of the others. And it's just like there's no balancing. And what Doug is saying is important. We need more entrepreneurs in various industries. But here's the difference. Within our community, we're not preparing our children, our family members, to slide into industries. We're just not. If you look at certain communities, I'm not going to name it because sometimes people are like, oh, you're being whatever.
Mhm.
Certain communities, they tell their children what they're going to study. They direct their children into what industry they're going to go to.
That's true.
If it's entrepreneurship, they're already in the path. If it's legal, law, like if it's law or medical or chiropractics or whatever, they've already laid the foundation, and you're going to do this. Now, whether
Yes.
that's good, bad, or indifferent is a whole nother story. But at the same token, where's the longevity?
Right. Yeah, it's like you're going to do what your father did. If your father was a physician, you're going to be a physician. If your dad was a shoe cobbler, guess what? You're going to have a shoe cobbler business. And that's the way things were, and that's
Yeah,
the way things are traditionally with a lot of families in the
yeah,
Black community. I don't think we have that traditionalism because of our history and our topsy-turvy, upside down, discombobulated history as a people. It
yeah.
keeps us from having those nice traditions.
I mean, I see so many weird things. It's like sometimes I think to myself, are we like cursed? I'm Haitian by background, and I look at the Haitian community as a subset of the Black community where the same sufferings exist, but to a higher extent. Because what I
Excuse me.
start to notice is, for a Haitian family, let's say they open a restaurant, they'll work that restaurant for years and years and years and years. But the moment that they pass away, their kids don't take over the restaurant because their kids never worked in the restaurant. Their kids don't know nothing about the restaurant industry. They're not involved. And if they do take over, it's gone within a period of time. And so I think at its core, too, we're not even preparing for the idea. It's almost like, I own a law firm, but I'm not even conceiving of the fact that my plan is to pass it on to somebody else. It's just not even a thought. And, when we get an opportunity to sell or to make a big change in our structure for our business, what do? We sell out to other groups, right? If I have something that's very popular and I make a whole lot of money, what's the first thing I do? I go and sell, but I'm not selling it to us, right? I always think of what is it? Is it BET that is owned by another group of people, or is it
Yeah,
I
yeah.
forgot the television.
BET was purchased by, I forgot the was it Viacom, another big huge network.
So again,
Yeah.
where are we? If we can't be in position at network level, if we can't be in position at community level, we can't be in position for politics. I see a lot of Black politicians, right, in all types of communities. The numbers are still staggeringly different, right, if you look at the House versus the Senate. But how many of these Black politicians are helping other Black politicians come up? What I tend to see instead is the same person in a seat for 20, 30, 40 years. And I'm exaggerating, but it's how it feels, right? I look at the ballot,
Well,
I'm like, why is the same person there year after year after year after year and nothing?
well, in certain communities, and like in certain white communities, rural communities, where it's the same character of folks and the same class of people, all they're going to put their politician in each and every time. If
Yeah,
it's 100 years, it's going to happen 100 years straight.
yeah,
That's the rule. We just have to establish ourselves in these ways. Like some of these ways aren't bad ways to establish ourselves in. We just have to do it, but
right.
we don't live in neighborhoods long enough without having to move in and move out because we can't afford the same thing happens in real estate, Sandy.
Yeah,
The exact same thing happens as a realtor. I see this where people in the Black community, they're not allowing other Black realtors to help them. They're allowing other people, other communities to come into the neighborhood and sell to people who look like them, which
right.
eventually ends up changing the character and the community of the entire neighborhood. And then you wonder why this community doesn't look the same anymore. Why it doesn't have the same businesses? Why you don't
Right.
recognize anything? Because we actually have to invest in preserving what we have, what we establish. So if we establish something good within our community, we're all duty bound to protect whatever that is, be it
Yeah,
certain institutions and businesses that are employing people and growing. I
right.
mean, there has to be a commitment more than me, myself, and I. It's all about me. What can I do for myself? You get yours because I got mine. This is a lot of what the current attitude is that I think we're suffering from.
So Doug says we are taught to follow our passions, and I'm learning other cultures follow a particular career path and let the career path fund your passion. And I think that's very smart. Like, can you imagine in a family of five, for example, if each individual took a career path that was going to bring in wealth into that family, and in addition, being able to fund whatever it is that they want to do as their passion. So you'd have not only a high earning, but you'd also have a high contribution to the community. You'd have a dual scenario for each member of the family. But in our families, a lot of times it's just, all right, go to school, get an education, either get a degree, go to the military, and then that's it. There's not really a dictation of, well, you need to do this, that, or the third. And there's not even
Right.
a preparation at the primary level, or, there's not even preparation for you to even be thinking, hey, I can't just study this general area because this is the job prospect for that. And right now, I would say if anybody is trying to get their child into a mindset of what to study, tech should be the area. And I
Yes.
mean tech in all realms. It's not
Yes.
just saying study tech, but it's studying tech from the medical perspective,
And
from the
coding.
legal perspective, from
Yeah.
business, from coding,
Yeah,
all of that.
yes. All of the yeah, those tech careers are very valuable. And see, those are the things that we have to talk about this because, as a group, a lot of us may not even think where should I be trying to think about guiding my children into the careers that's going to sustain them the longest in their futures.
Right.
That you can help with that planning now. We talk about it now that there are careers right now that are considered kind of recession proof.
Yeah.
You think about some of the changes in the economy, people who were in the healthcare industry, they're all right. Certain other types of industries. If you worked in the liquor industry and, certain type of conveniences, you were all right.
Right.
But long term, we have to understand those trends and direct our children to the path that's going to sustain them the longest. And like Doug is saying, use kind of like that tradition to help fund some of your break off interests and other things you want to do, but you stay on the path that sustains the family.
And I like Doug's point. That's the truth. Our politicians have been in office for 20 years and few close to 40 years. Look, I was looking at the ballot this cycle around, and when I went to vote, I literally went down through all of the candidates. And there were a good handful of candidates that I know for fact have been on the ballot since forever. I intentionally voted against. And we have to start opening ourselves up to new ideas and new thoughts. There can't be growth with stagnation. And I start to look at certain things and I say to myself, this person's been in this position for all this time. What has changed during their time? Not to say that they are in charge of all change, but you can't have growth and change if you have the same people sitting. It's like having a judge sitting on the bench for 30 years. Yes, there's some benefits to that, but if the judge is not accomplishing anything, or if they're delaying the system, or if they're ineffective, letting them sit on the bench all that time, how does that help our community, right? We're going to still
Right.
have backlogs with the courts and all kinds of other things.
And
If we don't
politicians, sorry, go ahead.
if we don't vote in people that may stimulate some change, we're always going to be having the same conversations.
That's true. And politicians have to get out and talk to people. That was the one thing I was going to add to what you're saying, because if they don't get out and talk to people and let folks know, like, look, I am one person in one district, and we have, folks of different political persuasions that are constantly trying to push their values and their beliefs on these smaller communities. And I'm the person that's standing here doing all the pushback. And if you get rid of me, guess what? You don't have anyone to stop the attack of the extremists on the other side. So
Right.
if a politician is in a position like that where they're not strong enough to really affect change, but they can ward off with their vote, keep some other things from happening. I mean, if they're talking to the community, people understand the political dynamics and may get out, support, and vote for them. The other problem is that we don't vote as a community group like we should. We have to get into voting, get into it, yo, and especially to Black men, I would say, because they are the one group that votes the least of all the groups. If you look at Black men or white men, Black men, white women, Black women, you usually see things in that order, but that's kind of the order in which things kind of line up politically.
And,
So
and I,
what is the problem with Black men feeling like they can just sit on the sidelines of a political system that's trying to kick us in the a double, you know what?
I'm going to tell you some thoughts that I've heard in terms of talking to, different Black men over the years about this concept of voting and the desire to vote versus not vote. And Doug says Maxine Waters got to go. That's so funny. One of the issues is many times people do not feel like there's a purpose for voting. And I can't blame them, because you have to think a lot about some of the issues that surround some of these elections. What I've learned over the years is that, politics is not what it may seem. And many of the folks that are in position, many of the folks that are taking seat, are not taking seat because they're the right person for the job. They're taking seat because they're the most popular person for the job, right? And so it can be a bit like just despairing, right? It can create a bit of angst against the system. And what I've noticed that a lot of Black men will say is just like, what am I voting for? The people that are going to get in position are going to get in position anyway. And it's unfortunate that sometimes that is the thought, but that's a lot of the issues that I hear. And Doug says Black men need to stop getting criminal records that's preventing them from voting. I agree as well with that, because when you think about the percentage of individuals that are being charged with certain petty offenses, especially drug offenses now, and then you have this cannabis industry that is taking hold, that's basically drug, obviously not drug in the context of what we're talking about, but you have the cannabis industry, and then you have people still being arrested for marijuana.
And then you still have, and then you have
Like
people,
confused.
yeah, and then you have people who are, still losing their lives at traffic stops, and people who are still losing their lives while jogging down a neighborhood street in their own community. So the thing is, yeah, Black folks need to stop getting criminal records, but you can't really talk about that in a vacuum without talking about all the bias and prejudice that runs rampant through American police departments, that goes unchecked day in and day out. Because why? The community obviously values police officers, as they should, as I do as well. But you cannot hold them above the law. And they're getting away with that with certain class of people that are disregarded by society. Uh, to me, number one being Black men. So if there's any reason to stand up politically and to mount yourself politically and stand up against injustices, Black men have every reason in the world to do it because of what's happened to them historically.
So
and
like this.
currently.
I like this comment here. Not only do we need to vote, we also need to pay attention to the political landscape, because after the election, hey, we all go back to sleep. Nobody cares. But when you look at some of these shifts in the political landscape just here in South Florida, there were a lot of folks that were voted out finally. And I was crossing my fingers like, when are they going to get so-and-so off of the ballot, off the bench, off of any political seat? Because there are a handful of folks that get into the system. They never should have been there to begin with. But of course, we're sleeping because most of us are just getting those little pieces of paper from whatever collective that decided on what ballot we're going to vote for, whatever interest that they think we should vote for. No, I'm not doing that anymore. That little piece of paper that circulates that people are, telling you these are the people to vote for. Nope. I'm looking at the candidate information. I'm looking at their website.
Oh, yeah,
I'm looking at their credentials.
Yes.
I'm looking at some of the information. And I definitely lean towards voting for Black folks, but that's not with a blinder.
Right.
Some of these Black folks I was voting against completely because I'm like, you're not doing nothing. And I'm not going to just vote for you because you're Black.
Right.
Some of you I will, but some of you I already know what time it is. You've been in office and nothing's happening. So
right. The ones who've been there, who've just, like you said, who've been there year and year, and you don't see progress. They're not communicating. They should lose their positions. And there's a lot of people chomping at the bit to try to get in there and do things the right way for the community. But I want to talk specifically, how do we actually keep the Black dollar in the communities, for longer than 6 hours? What is this thing that the Black dollar only stays in the Black community for 6 hours? What is this? And what are we really talking about? I wanted to see if we can explore that a little bit more. And I'm wondering if this article will give us just a little bit more insight on that. Let's see, where was I? All right, so I'm just going to read just a few more things about this.
We're at these statistics.
Okay, thank you. Where it says at 47.8.
The second paragraph on the screen.
Okay. These statistics have been largely argued over the last 2 decades, yet the massive gap of wealth is still clear within communities. The Black dollar is extremely limited, potentially leaving Black businesses in the dust. Cheryl Grace is Nielsen's Senior Vice President of Community Alliances and Consumer Engagement. And she says in a report about the buying power among Black Americans, at 47.8 million strong, and a buying power that's on par with many countries, gross domestic products, African Americans continue to outpace spending nationally. Okay, that was disjointed. So 47.8 million strong. That is the Black, or she's talking about the Black dollar, the buying power, right? And yes. So we have the gross domestic product on the equivalent of countries, right? Gross domestic products. African Americans continue to outpace some countries nationally. So continuing on, that's very interesting. The national buying power of Blacks in 2019 was $1.4 trillion. according to the report by some economic growth institute. However, this number has nothing to do with the wealth within the community, since that money was already accounted for and spent. By definition, buying power consists of the exchange of goods and services and the needs within our community. So I think I'll stop right there. So we have the 447.8 trillion represents the amount of folks and the amount of buying power that we have, and we have enough buying power on the whole that can outpace some countries. How about that? Do we even know that we had a buying power that's 1.4 trillion? Do we? I mean, can we even count that up to that number?
It doesn't surprise me whatsoever. I mean, I can just think in the legal profession and looking at my colleagues, and thinking about what happens when we start to acquire even a few dollars. What is the first thing we do? We go buy expensive vehicles, we buy expensive homes, we spend on lavish trips, we spend on lavish, we got to have the Louis Vuitton, we got to have the Gucci, we got to have the Balenciaga.
Louis.
And the interesting part is when you start to look at the numbers, because it's so funny, I've had a few family law cases over the years. And when you start to look at the numbers on the exterior, they look wealthy. They look like they have some money. When you start to crunch the numbers, they're living off of credit cards, overextended in debt, whether it be loans or other things. They're taking money off of their houses. They're taking money off of all kinds of different things. They're cashing out of their retirement funds and doing all kinds of things just to make that dollar.
Reverse mortgages.
All
They're
kinds of stuff.
basically cutting off the legacy to the inheritance to their generation, their future generations,
All
by
kinds of
doing
stuff.
reverse mortgages. Because when they die, you got some mortgage company that takes the property because they didn't gave you money for it in your life. So now they just take your house when it's all said and done. So I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, we have all of these things happening.
We just have a lot of backwards priorities, and I say we collectively, because obviously this doesn't impact every aspect of our community. We're not a monolith. Every single Black person doesn't do the exact same thing, but we're just talking about the surface, right? We're talking about the folks that make up this $1 trillion buying power, because I'm gonna tell you something, I'm not part of that trillion.
I
I'm
think we
I'm not
all
buying
are.
none of that stuff. I don't
I
want
think,
that whatever car. I don't want all that excess stuff, because in all honesty, it does nothing for me. It
but
just
we're in
doesn't.
that number, whether we want to be in that number or not. Because here's the thing: you have to think about, when I need a physician, where am I going? When I need a grocery store, where am I going? When I need to buy supplies for my office, where am I going? When I
Right.
need things for my house repairs, how many other places do you know but besides Home Depot and a
But
few other
notice what you just
places?
said. You said need. I'm not just talking about needs, because that $1 trillion amount, I will be willing to bet if they went in and were able to analyze and say needs versus wants, I'm willing to bet it's over the top on the wants side, not the needs.
I think
Obviously, the
it's
needs are
everything.
core expenses. I have to go to the grocery store and I don't have a
Yes.
choice where I'm going to shop. I
Hmm.
have to buy certain things. I have to go to the doctor.
Hmm.
I don't have to buy Balenciaga red bottoms. I
Right.
don't have to buy those things.
Right. So there's some things that, it's just necessity. And then there's some things that's going to be obviously discretionary income. And I think in both categories, we're spending outside of our communities, whether it's those things regarding our everyday needs or those discretionary things like the Louis Vuitton bag, or, some of the other high upper end items that you see that people in the Black community purchase a lot, for status, quite frankly, whether they have houses or stocks and investments, to have that Rolex watch, to have that Louis Vuitton bag, to have that Lexus car with that Lexus car note. I mean, a lot of people feel that if they don't have, if they can't, in other words, some people feel like you have to fake it till you make it, right? That you have to have a certain image out there of success in order to attract that, because the laws of attraction are real. I'll give you that. However, we have to operate within our boundaries. And I think that's where we're losing it. So if we don't need these bags like Sandy's talking about, then we need to find out some safer, sounder investments
I think
for
we need to find
ourselves.
out why we value these things over all else. And the only reason I'm saying this is, when I came from the nonprofit world and went into education and then came into law, I started to see the connections between those realms. And one of the common themes over and over was always, we, for whatever reason, have this desire to not only want things that we can't afford, right? Affordability to me is at its core, but something that Doug is saying in this point, it's the supply chain. Because even when we are supporting a Black owned business, we're definitely not supporting Black manufacturers or Black vendors. Because a lot of times, even the things that we're getting from our own businesses, they had to be sourced outside of our community. So we're not even hitting at the basic level any economical growth or power because
Yeah,
we
we
don't
don't run
have a
those.
system of things.
We're not in all aspects of business, like the distribution side. We totally have no grip or no clause on distribution. So even if you make a product, you're going to need established what's already in place, those means of distribution. And those means are not owned by people that look like you and I, Sandy.
Truth.
So if they don't cater to us and help distribute our products, we are in trouble because we don't own distribution. So that's the one thing. He who owns distribution is king, to be honest with you, because they can get their product out there in front of people for purchase. That's huge. That's something that we have to work on. How do we get national distribution? How do we get distributions besides just our neighborhood or just, our online webpage? How do we
And I
nationalize? How do we scale our businesses?
and I see Doug commenting, I wonder how much of that $1 trillion buying power, how much credit makes up that spending power versus actual income. I'm willing to bet it's more credit than anything else. I think if they were able to calculate numbers there, I'm willing to bet it's more credit than all else. I think in looking at a lot of the probate cases, so if I've had maybe 50, 60 probate cases in the last few years, I would say the bulk of the creditors are credit cards. And the amounts typically are like 8,000, 10,000, 20,000, 15,000, 12,000. Like it's always thousands of dollars in credit card debt. And then I start to look at the comparison. You look at, the person's income and lifestyle and things like that. They don't have nothing. And many times barely is the family able to handle the probate. Everybody's trying to piecemeal. Or if they're lucky, they might have left a life insurance policy. But the big bulk is credit card debt. And somehow people think that when you pass away, your credit card debt goes away. No, they're the first people, in addition to the medical bills, they're the first ones to put out their hand because they're collecting upon your death. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Doug says hopping off, but he'll be listening. Thank you so much, Doug. Good morning, Miss Globe Girl. Truly appreciate you for tuning in with
Yes,
us this
thank
morning.
you.
And good morning, Snuggles 668. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Snuggles 668. Sandy, there was a book. I don't know. There's an attorney. Let's see. Maggie and John Anderson. They're two lawyers. I think they're out of Chicago, raising two daughters in the suburbs of Chicago. Well, Maggie Anderson wrote a book called Our Black Year. And I believe this book came out, it was originally published in 2012. But she talks about the decision of her family. The Anderson family decided that they were going to buy Black for an entire year. I mean, strictly Black, period,
Right.
because they wanted to engage that process of being conscientious and supportive of each other. They struggled so much during that year. They're like, we can't find this and we need that. And
Oh
we ain't got
gosh.
nobody to sell us this. And then when they found certain stores, like, oh wow, we found someone that sells this. And then like 2 months into the year, the damn business shut down. You know what I mean? Because they have a whole year of buying Black. And she said the struggle in the Black community to supply all of our needs internally is real. It's
Look,
hard. Like it's hard to like on some things they literally could not just depend on what was in the black community to supply their needs as a family. They had to break their own rule because there was nobody. There were voids in many different areas. So if you guys have a chance to get this book, it's very interesting. It's called Our Black Year: One Family's Quest to Buy Black in America's Racially Divided Economy.
what's this family's name?
It's the Anderson family. It's Maggie Anderson is a black attorney who wrote this book. Her and her husband are business folks in Chicago, doing very well, I might add. But she said when they that one year, their the way their lifestyle, everything went down.
Maggie, if I had known you, I would have already done told you. Maggie, we don't got enough. There's a like I even just the thought of it, right? Like I'm right now sitting here thinking to myself, if I had to survive on buying black and obtaining all of my goods black owned only, I'm done already. Just the first few minutes thinking about it. Just here locally, South Florida, maybe just looking at Miami-Dade County or even the Tri-County area or even the whole state of Florida. I can't think of a way to accomplish that. I just can't. Now, maybe there's some smuggling I could do here and there and trying to go to different parts of the state, maybe to get that accomplished. But realistically, to live, no. So Snuggles has a question here. Do you have products I can buy straight from the producer? Or do you have emails or phone numbers set up so if we want your products, it can be shipped straight? I mean, honestly, we try to share information on different folks who are providing, black-owned goods. But truth be told, many times this is not direct, right? Sometimes these individuals are getting their goods sourced from other groups. So it's not, I can't really say that we have that. Good morning, Rigo. Thank you so much.
Good
Always
morning,
appreciate
Rigo.
you for tuning in.
Yes.
All right. And Doug is talking to Snuggles. Appreciate y'all having some conversations in the chat. Definitely love it. Let's see. And Snuggles says, Doug, where have you been, stranger? What is the reason why a community is having a lot of issues buying from its own? It's the lack of infrastructure or manufacturing. I think it's a combination of things. And
yeah, I think it's all of you can check all of those boxes.
yeah,
It's just how do we begin to change these dynamics? And if we don't do something, if everybody is an individual and we just do things individualistically, then how do we begin to affect massive change or collective change? We actually have to get on the same page and collectively decide that we as members of a group have to do things a certain way. Because remember, we're the smaller group. So we have to amass ourselves to have any kind of strength. And that's the one thing that we're missing is organization and structure.
So Snuggle says, have you all ever tried to look up the Spanish community and see if you can buy everything that you need from them? And if so, why are they able to do that? The Spanish community has been as interesting to me as the Jewish community, because I noticed certain things specifically here in South Florida, because we're a very huge hub of the community, Cuban community, the Venezuelan community,
Jewish.
And the Jewish community. I mean, I live right on the borderline of a huge Jewish community. When I say temple on every block, they take over the streets on the Saturdays and Friday nights. I think one of the collective issues is they support one another. And I'm not saying support as in we're friends, because a lot of times they don't even get along. It's not about friendship. It's about support. If there is a Jewish chiropractor, all the Jewish folks go to them. There's Jewish medical doctor, all of them go to them. Jewish supermarket, they all go to them. Whatever other sourced goods, products, whatever, within community purchase. I look at the same thing with the Cuban community as an example. You go to any parts of Hialeah, everything is them. Supermarket, tile for your floors, carpeting, fixtures, kitchen appliances, general food items, food stores, beauty products, beauty salons. Everything is within their community and their money is passing hands with each other. You want to know why? Because it's intentional. We talk about intentional spending today. It's intentional. So we have to start where we are. Example for me and Lisa. We go to a salon for our nails, Black owned. Now imagine if she was able to connect with a Black nail manufacturer, whoever makes the nail polish. There has to be a company out there that potentially may do it themselves. Imagine if she connected with that. And imagine if that person connected with another entity, and if that person connected with another. It's really about intentionality. And unfortunately, I have to say this about us. We're not intentional with our spending. We're intentional with what we want personally. So we're going to individualistically, we are. Because if we want something, you'll notice we'll get into the community that we want to. We'll get the car that we want to, the house that we want to. We'll take the trips that we want to. We'll be all kinds of things.
We're good at that. We're really good all kinds at of doing things. And we will go and be amongst any kind of people, any kind of where, and will not be bothered if that's right. What we want to do. We know how to do that.
If we're intentional about anything, it's oftentimes trying to get away from ourselves. That's what I've noticed in our community. And it's really sad, because you start to ask yourself, Lisa asks this question all the time, is their ice colder? And there is every other community. Is their ice colder than our ice? No, because a lot of communities utilize Black everything to capitalize. You ask yourself this: when was the last time that you saw a Black owned anything in an Asian community or a Jewish community?
Like never.
But flip the question. When was the last time that you saw a Jewish owned or a Asian owned or any other grouping owned business in the Black community?
They're all here. They're in our communities all the time, everywhere they want to be. Whether it's the clothing store where you go get your Sunday get up or your Sunday get down. You got the Jewish man selling Black folks they Sunday best clothes in our communities. You have folks in our communities selling our grandmother's string beans and collard greens and things from gardens that they don't know nothing about, because they're not farming. They don't have the land. They don't have the space to farm. So now they're going to other folks and other groups to get things like that. These are things that we can ignore and say, oh, well, as long as we have somewhere to go. Right. But it should really bother all of us that we're not able to spend money in our own communities without going outside and giving it to someone who doesn't look like us and definitely is not going to bring any money, yet alone not going to buy a house in your neighborhood, yet alone next to you.
So Snuggle says, do you all use Africa for your raw materials? I've thought about that over the years, whether or not we as Black business owners tap into the motherland. I don't know. I couldn't answer that question. I will say that I'm noticing more and more people are attempting to make those types of connections. I don't know on a grand scale, though, how close we are to doing that type of thing. I mean, it would be helpful because that's supporting the Black community. But I will tell you that I have started to see a rise in sentiments that are anti. So to be like the Africans against the African Americans, the Caribbean folks against the African Americans, the Caribbean folks against the Africans. It's like it's a weird thing that doesn't make any sense because it's counterproductive to all of our growth. Doug says he is in the Asian community, LOL. Well, Doug, no problem. We're almost in the Jewish community at this point because they're about to buy up this side too. So trust me, I understand your rareness. And Snuggle says, are you blaming the people who sell you your products, or are you blaming the people who buy the product? You have the power in the situation. So here's the thing.
I like the way she posed that question.
This conversation is not actually about blame. I can't be upset with communities that are selling goods in my community, just like I can't be upset with people who go to other communities to buy goods. That's not really what it's about. It's about talking about the Black dollar and the unevenness in our economy. I think out of fairness, I should say that, we haven't had a level playing field in our economy in all of my life.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that part.
All of my life.
That's important.
So it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, those people in our community. It's more so, wow, those people are in our community. Why can't we have another person in the community? And why can't we have another? It's a monopoly. Beauty supply stores is notorious for I forgot what community it is. I can't just say it's just Asian community because there's different communities, but beauty supply stores are notorious for this. I have rarely seen a beauty supply store from any other group, but one group in the Asian community. Same with nail salons. You'll see a dominant prevalent force, right? Now, what's the reason for that? They are intentional in their business targeting. We're not intentional in that. So my actual blame is we have a job to do. And it's important for us to be intentional in our spending, not at the exclusion of groups, because obviously there's always going to be folks that are going to spend monies on the Louis and the Valencias and the whatever. That's fine. And there's always going to be folks that are going to buy from other communities. That's fine. The issue is, why is it so drastically uneven? Because it's not even to a logical sense, right? And so the argument can't be pointing fingers. That doesn't get us anywhere. We're already behind the mark, right? So I'm not interested in trying to say, oh, this community, this didn't. They're already here doing their thing. Yeah. In fact, what I am doing is trying to say, what are they doing? Is their ice colder? Or is it just that we're not even making the attempt to try to get into these industries? Is there any barrier to us getting into the industry? That's what I'm asking about.
Yes, there are barriers. There are things that are holding us back. Think about it, Sandy. When a lot of these folks come over here as foreign nationals through the immigration system, they must come stacked with a certain amount of money. They got to have a certain amount of chips in their pocket before they land on American soil, because the American government is not trying to set them up in the welfare system. So they need to come here with money, number one, and they come here ready to start businesses.
Right.
They know, they're very intentional when they come here. They know they're going to come into Black and brown communities where the prices are depressed, the property values are depressed, and they're going to get land and tenancies, and they're going to come in and build their businesses. Most people make their money off the backs of poor people. That's how a lot of people make their money. That equation has not changed. We just have to be smarter and be more intentional about where we spend our money and grow our base. That's it. We have to protect and invest in ourselves. So it starts with talking about it. It's not, somebody said on another day, one of our shows, somebody said, I'm not going to buy from someone just because they're Black. I'm going to buy their products if I like their product.
And I respond to that. I'm going to buy from someone because they're Black, because that is my choice and my preference. Now, am I excluding other groups? As I said again, no. First of all, there's no way to do that. Second of all, I don't look at it from a lens of, oh, wow, I can't buy from that person because they don't look like me. If that were the case, my whole life would have been torn, because growing up in the environment that I grew up in, where everything around me was predominantly white, and even now in my profession, everything around me is predominantly white, I would be torn. I'd be completely lost. That's not even realistic. So, I like what Doug says. We need more diversity. Our primary industries when we go into entrepreneurship are restaurants and hair salons. Absolute truth. We don't think about printing industry. We don't think about electronics. We don't think about tech. We don't think about all these manufacturing, distributors, supply. We don't think about any of that. Farming. We don't think about all those things. And it's important for us to be more directed in those realms. We're not making the attempts.
I see. I can't really say that. Now, we've been the victims of a lot of mass discrimination, even at the governmental level. The government itself, kind of ignored Black folks' plight for a long time in this country. So, and we didn't get civil rights in this country until 1964. I mean, that's not quite like 5000 BC. It's not that long ago. So, and Black farmers have been struggling in this country to get basic rights and privileges and government welfare, the same as white farmers have needed over time. But their plight has been different, and they've been handled differently. And the government has a lot to do with that. So we have a lot of dynamics for all that we do to beat ourselves up. We have to think that there's a lot of folks out there trying to beat us up right along with us doing it to ourselves.
I agree with some pushback. I think no time than this age of 2022 are we in the position where we have a voice, we have opportunity, we have access, we have professionals in many industries, we have experiences beyond what we probably could have said in the past. I don't even think we're making attempts in many realms. If we have the level of buying power that we have, it's because we are able to do certain things. So if we're able to do buying at the level that we are, what else do you think we could do with our money if there was some sense of collective economics?
Okay, that number
It's
was
about intentionality at this point.
That number was 1.4 trillion.
Trillion dollars.
Okay.
Not million,
So,
not billion.
Can you imagine if everybody intentionally banked $1 a day for a year to some collective overall cause for our community and building up the infrastructure? Can you imagine a concerted effort of just $1 a day or $352, $365 a year? Can you imagine?
To be truthful, I can't even conceive of it, because I think unfortunately the level of things that have happened to the Black community has created a lot of tracks of behaviors, and psychologically speaking, I can't even conceive of it. Because even the few Black-owned banks that we have, there's certain behaviors and things that go on within these institutions that just remind me how we're either cursed or we surely just are not going to get a clue. Like there's something at its fundamental core that is wrong. And I can't even conceive of it. Like, you're saying it and it's coming out of your mouth and I can't even conceive of it. Like, I feel like that's how behind the mark that we are right now. Let me see some comments here. If you have a lot of hair salons, can you buy the products that the hair salon uses? You know what's funny? My loctician, she actually created her own line. And so all of her clients, she actually not only does our hair, she sells shampoos, conditioners, hair oils, hair pomades, all kinds of accessories for hair. And I'm noticing a lot of the folks in the hair and the nails and all of these spaces are starting to take advantage of certain things and maybe adding some things to their offerings so that you're buying more from them probably than ever before.
Yeah, there's a lot of repackaging going on. Like I said, we don't own distribution. So there's still someone out there that's distributing these products, and they're allowing these companies to be able to put their personalized brands on their products.
Sorry. I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about her making her own, like shampoos, conditioners, and stuff like that.
Oh, so she literally makes her own shampoos.
Yeah, she makes her own like creams and stuff like that, because she only sells it in small supply.
Okay, well that's different, and I commend her because that's a different level than what I've seen out there.
Yeah. Let me see. Miss Globepro said, I'd really like to see more Black banks, but I've always thought, what does having Black banks really entail, and what are the pros and cons? You know, I would love to see if we can get a banker on the show. We've been talking about it, and we spoke to somebody recently that we might try to tap into. The Black banking situation is really strange to me, because even when a few years back, when they were trying to get everybody to go to, I think it was something like One United Bank.
Yes.
You know, a lot of folks were just like, including myself, why? And I'm going to tell you why. At the time, and I'm not talking about now, they might have improved certain things. At the time, here locally, I could think of one branch that's nowhere near me. And then there was like another branch like further north. I don't know if it was like Central Florida or something like that. And then it was like, I was trying to look at like the features, you know, what was the online banking, you know, all these things. And there were some things that were just kind of off-putting to me. And it created one of those situations where I was like, no, thanks. Now, is there a pro to having a Black-owned bank? I would think so. The problem is, to me, it's about the circulation of the money, right? And if you have a Black-owned bank, then you should ideally have, you know, a Black bank that will support Black business and Black communities and give more loans, but they're going to operate in many ways just like the other communities. I mean, they're still not going to be giving money within the Black community at the level that would be needed. There's still going to be issues with credit levels and people being able to get like lines of credit or even business loans. There's still going to be issues with business credit because the standards are created and they're offset in a way that many in the Black community are not going to meet. They're already behind the mark. So it's, to me, the Black banking idea is a challenge because you're not going to get the buy-in that you probably want, because there's already an idea in many of our heads that it's not going to be, the ice is not going to be as cold. And I'm going to be honest with that. That's what a lot of people are thinking. Like,
my money is not going to be as safe over here as it would be over in that commercial bank that sits on the boulevard.
Yeah. Doug says, most of us are taught to go to college to get a career instead of entrepreneurship. Doug, when I think back, I would throw away all of my degrees. I have 3 degrees. I would throw all of them away if by some rare chance I would go back in time and make a decision at that point. Because at that point, I was full of ideas. I could travel. I could do so many different things. And entrepreneurship for me would have been key. The level of work that I was throwing into when I got my first job right out of college, had I been able to throw that into a business while I was still living at home and still enjoying the perks of not having a lot of things to pay for, astronomical growth, without question. If you have a lot of food industry, who do you buy the fruits, vegetables, and meat that are Black? Because those 2 industries are very powerful if everything from manufacturing to consumption. You know, it's interesting that I'm seeing here in Southern Florida, I'm seeing a lot of Black farmers sprouting up. I'm seeing a lot of collectives teaching people how to farm in their own yard, like their own garden. I'm seeing a lot of people, both in my friend circle and in my colleague circle, who are moving to growing their own fruits and vegetables.
I agree. Sustainability, yes.
So I think there's a possibility for Black-owned food industry folks to be able to tap into Black-owned farms and others. I think the hardest part is the manufacturing piece.
Manufacturing and distribution. We don't own any of those chains. So that therein lies the problem. If we want to grow, we have to scale and nationalize our little local mom and pop businesses. But even before we get there, how about just supporting the businesses that are there? How about supporting those small mom or pop businesses while they're mom or pop, you know, before they become big national businesses? We can start there. And that word intentional is a very powerful word. And so focus some of your dollars intentionally on trying to see how long you can keep your dollars in the Black community. It's not going to be all your dollars, but a certain aspect or portion of your dollars. Try to see what you can do to keep them in the Black community. Because you know when that money goes out the Black community, when you say, oh, there's no person in our community that there's no Black dry cleaner. Well, guess what? That money just went out the community. And when you say we don't have a Black physician in this neighborhood, well, guess what just happened? You got it. That money just went out the community. So the more we don't have that infrastructure, as I think Doug and the other young lady referred to, maybe Snuggles, the more we don't have that infrastructure, the more we have to take that money outside, guys. So I think we know the answers, but we have to build on what we have, and we have to own more of what we have. Because when you rent, somebody can come along and kick you out. When your business builds up and you're doing real well, they can say, give me a whole lot more money or get out. So we have to begin to own where we keep our businesses at too, so no one can just put us out when they get ready.
So Doug says, over the past decade, entrepreneurship is becoming more popular, and we've definitely seen that. I mean, I know personally so many people that have kind of stepped out and made that decision, mostly because of the way that employment is working in a lot of industries right now. Rigo says, why banks? How about teaching how universal life insurance works? And this way, future family generations will benefit from this. I mean, I will say to you this, Rigo, about insurance. It's a yes and no for me. The problem with many folks when it comes to insurance is the fact that they don't even get enough coverage. Most of the time, people will get these little small policies, and by the time you're actually done with expenses, there's minimal to none left. after. So I think the one conversation that needs to happen with the insurance industry is folks need to understand what the proper level of coverage is that they should have based upon their circumstances, especially if they have any intention of doing some type of wealth transfer to the next generation or the next. We don't tend to have enough insurance, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah,
Um,
we should get some more insurance professionals on here, because people in the white community and other more established communities, they use life insurance for legacy planning.
yeah,
So they may not be rich in their lifetimes, but if they buy enough $1 million policies, their children are going to be well off. So
right.
this trend has been started in other cultures a long time ago, and so they're well ahead of us in terms of wealth and legacy planning.
Yeah.
But we have to use life insurance in the same way. It may not be able to help us, but you can certainly help your offspring to be able to sustain themselves and their futures through insurance and
Right.
legacy planning.
So Snuggle says something important. What are the businesses that keeps up a bank? As I said earlier, I think we really need to bring a banker on to have some discussions about
Yes.
the impact of a bank in a community, and generally speaking, where do they see the money is coming from? Because obviously, I would think small business would be a great influence in the banking industry, but I'm wondering what the percentage of small business funding comes into a bank versus individual, and what the role of things like mortgages versus lines of credit or credit cards and other parts. So I'm always wondering what the composition is of a bank, like what really sustains a bank. So thank you for that question, Snuggles.
Yeah,
We'll definitely.
that's a really good question. I know in my hometown, the black bank that was there years ago, it failed. They made a lot of loans out of the small bank, and a lot of those black folks didn't pay them loans back, and that bank failed. So the thing is that it still has to be about business, fitness.
Oh
you
my
still have
God.
a you still have to run a business and not a fitness, right? So that means that you have to scrutinize who you're lending money to. All those rigors have to still stay in place. But if you have a black bank in your community and folks are still going to the commercial banks that don't look like them to pay their their mortgage note, their car note, their loans for their business, their unsecured credit debt, then that's a problem. Because if that black banking institution cannot help people take care of their financial needs, then we don't just need a big piggy bank in the neighborhood that's not lending, that's not investing, that's not giving back. And I think some of these black banks, when they're getting set up, they just want you really to put money in so they can build up their reserves, so they can have enough money to lend out, to lend against. But in the early times, they can't do a lot for you when you talk about getting a loan and things like that, because we're still fragile in so many respects while we're growing.
So Doug says, I see no difference in black owned banks. I've had an account with one since birth, but now they sold to another non-black bank. I'm always curious about this topic because, we talk about black owned in the context of circulating the black dollar. But I guess there's so many different questions. And the other thing is, if we have foundational issues within the community, I think it trickles into the banking. I think it trickles into the business. I think it trickles into our individual lives. Until we address the foundational issues within the community, it doesn't really, in some sense, matter if there is a black owned bank. I think we're still going to suffer from the same issues, and then you're going to have the bank selling off to another bank. Because
Yeah.
why? How are they going to sustain if we haven't resolved some of the psychological and economical issues within the community itself?
The
Because
biggest Sorry, Sandy. Just let me just throw this out real quick. The biggest thing that we can use, though, in our communities on the organizational piece, I think, would be the churches. Churches have a lot of power in Black communities in terms of organizational pull and draw. Like, they could be a source for organizing those efforts.
maybe,
Maybe,
maybe we'll definitely see.
maybe.
Um, let's see here. Do you have any names of black farmers, and do they have any websites or other communities that have access to if needed? I can only think of one. I don't remember the name offhand, but I don't see a lot of the For the few Black farmers that are local, I don't recall ever really seeing a promotional move. I think they really work with whatever entities or groups they work with, and I don't see it advertised as I would maybe think that it would be advertised. And
I
maybe
don't
I'm
know a
wrong.
black
Maybe
farmer. I do not know a black farmer. I do not know a black successful farming business or company. I don't know of a black farm where I can go and see the products that they're purchasing. I don't know of these things in America because black farmers have been oppressed and racially discriminated against historically. To it's they've almost been left paralyzed as an industry.
All right, so let's see here. Where do you get the seeds from when it comes to growing your fruits and vegetables, if you don't mind me asking? I will say my household personally, they will get the seeds from whatever fruits that they purchased. So if they purchased, let's say, for example, they purchased a pineapple or they purchased, some kind of peppers or something like that, they would get the seed from whatever they have and they would plant it. And that's where they would get their source from. I remember my mom years and years and years ago, they had like a mango tree that they had planted themselves when they moved here, as well as I don't remember if it was a lemon or lime tree. I think it might have been limes or something. I don't remember what grows down here. But different options of different things you could do. I know I've seen things like cucumbers, uh, potatoes, um, peppers has been a good one. Callaloo, I know I had a young lady that
Oh
was selling a lot
yeah.
of that. Um, Local people typically use what they have and they start with what they have. And I do see a lot of folks doing composting as well so that they can, nourish their crops themselves. So they're not even spending money to actually keep things up. They're using what they've already purchased.
A lot of people
Um,
are, we do have the small, like local farmers markets. Those are a little bit more posh to me because I think they're a little bit more pricey and boutique-ish. But you do see people who are into farming on a smaller level. At least they have a place to bring their products when they get ready to sell them. So I do see that. And then if you are like into growing, say, farming on a larger level, where are you going to get your seeds from? You're going to go to some established company that's already selling these seeds, and chances are they're not black or brown folks. I mean, let's keep it real. Those are the problems that we have. You almost have to look around and say, where are we missing? Look at all the industries and make a chart of everywhere where we're missing and begin to have a plan of how to educate young folks to go into these areas of enterprise where we're completely missing from. That would be important for the future.
So Rigo says, thank you for the info. Hey, maybe that could be your next show. We definitely, talk about Black banking, or just the banking industry in general. That would be a helpful topic. And I think farmers, maybe we can do a show
I,
on that.
I would love to find some black farmers, one or two or more. That'd be awesome.
I know one in Broward, one of my girlfriends goes to. So I'm going to ask her. She and her family tend to go there and help out and volunteer. Doug says, Snuggles, I doubt Black farmers have websites because they market to distributors instead of the general public, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's see. Snuggle says, does the people know that the banks in the community are Black? That I couldn't tell you. I think a lot of times there's a question mark of whether or not ownership actually exists in our community. I think that's one of the sometimes the misconception and sometimes just the lack of education of understanding that we do have some Black owned banks in our communities. It's just most folks are not looking for it.
And they stop
Um,
advertising. Like they need to, just because you say we're there and you say it in February during
yeah,
Black History Month. I
yeah,
mean, you have to keep marketing and letting people know, hello, give
I'm
us a
here.
few of your dollars this paycheck. Hello. And that's what's missing. I think they're not tooting their horns loud enough and asking people to come and support.
So Doug says, last I checked, it was about 3,500 Black farmers left, located mostly in the Southeast or throughout the South. Snuggle says, when it comes to building up infrastructure, what are the first things that needs to be done in a community? That is a very loaded question.
It's a planning
Um,
question. You got to sit down and plan and come up with a strategy on how to get more presents. Yeah, that takes some planning, Snuggles, but I'm glad you're thinking about it because it starts with that.
so I'm going to tell you one area where I see that we are lacking in the Black community. We live in communities, but we don't contribute to the communities that we live in. So, as an example, the city that I live in, when you think about the individuals that run the city, city operations are kind of in isolation in some ways. So, it matters who you put in those city council seats. It matters who the
Ooh,
city manager is, city attorney. It
yeah.
matters who the mayor is. It
Say it,
matters who
Sandy.
sits on all of these committees, whether it be
It's true.
safety, disability, activities, parks and recreation,
Yes.
utilities, all, the police, fire, all of these
Thank
different
you.
entities within your city. Most of us, and I'm going to say this across the board, this is not just Black folks, but specifically us as Black folks, we don't participate in any of that stuff. You know what we do? We'll complain about something, but we don't go to the city meeting. We'll complain about something, but we don't report it. We'll complain about something, but we don't put it on our agenda to say, what are we going to do about it? We're not going to call the police when we need to be calling the police. We're not going to call whatever city entity to
Oh,
come
wait,
out
wait,
and
wait.
deal with.
Now, point of contention. Oh, we calls the police now. Oh,
No, we
we
don't.
will call the police. What you mean?
I'm not talking about for I got an injury. I'm talking about for stuff that the police can be called for, like that mysterious car down the street, like that mysterious person that keeps walking up and down the street that is doing some funny business, like the situations
We
that are
don't
happening in the
snitch.
community.
We don't
That's not
snitch.
snitching. That's caring about your community. And this is what you're mentioning right now is one of my
Part of the
major
problem.
contentions with our community. This snitching concept, we're never going to grow. We're never going to grow because we
Snitches is for
think
bitches.
being responsive to what happens where we eat, sleep, and live is snitching. And that makes no sense whatsoever. I'm not going to agree with any thought.
I will never agree with that. Being a former prosecuting attorney, you know damn well I don't agree with that. If you got someone out there committing crime and havoc in your community, I say turn their butts in and get them off the street and get them some reform. That's what I say, because there's too many folks murders running around on our streets, all these unsolved murders. And these cops are like, oh, well, y'all don't want to turn nobody in. Guess what? They come into y'all neighborhood and they're going to be attacking y'all next.
Look, Snuggle says, what does the mental culture of the people in your community look like? So if we're talking about the Black community, unfortunately, we're not all the same. We're not a monolith. We don't have similar traits and characteristics in that sense. I will say one of the issues that I have with our community is there's a level of lack of respect for one another. And that mental culture, I would describe it as, is something that does hold us back from being able to be productive in different realms of our society. Because if we don't have trust for one another, and if we don't look at each other as if our ice is cold enough, we're going to have core issues all the time. Now, if I'm talking about my local community where I live in a community where I have Jewish, I have Haitian, I have Black American, I have Hispanic, I have a lot of different groups within a very weird combination here. And unfortunately, there is no mental culture within the community. There's a lot of segmenting. Asian community, they live here. Jewish community takes over here. Black folks are kind of intertwined here. Then you have the Spanish community. Then you have Indians, and we don't have a consensus in thought. Even when you look at the way the cities are planning events, they do things different for each group. You go to one event, it's like, oh, the city went all out. You go to the next event, oh, the city's looking at you like, no big deal. So I think it matters whether or not there is some kind of common ground within the community, but it starts at the city level and neighborhood level. And most of the time, we're not on the same page. Look outside of your home and look at your neighbors on the right and the left. Are y'all on the same page? Most likely not. Most likely not. Black-owned banks, Black-owned bank lending procedures are just like non-Black-owned banks. Absolutely. That's without question. And that's why I feel like, the concept of a Black-owned bank, great in theory. The question is it going to create circulation of dollars? Is it going to create circulation of funding? Is it going to increase opportunities for entrepreneurs within the local community?
Over time, it will. We have to be in. That's why they call it investment. We have to invest. Just like you put that seed in the ground and you wait for it to germinate and grow.
I
That's
don't
the
think they're
same.
selling that though, Lisa. That's the problem.
I
The black
agree
owned
with
bank is not
you.
selling that. It's like bank with us because we're black. No, bank with us because we're going to make sure that the community has this, that, and the third.
Right. Right. I totally agree with you. It's not just about being black, but you want black business in your you want businesses that look like yourself to be there. And that's called self-sufficiency, self-sustainability. That is not racist. Some people tend to think that it's racist to want to support yourself and to do
Yeah.
business with yourself. That is not racist. That's called self-preservation.
Snuggle says, "Where's most of the money spent from the people in your community?" I would be interested to know. I really don't know. It would be interesting to see the breakdown, and maybe we have to try to see if we can
Wait,
tap into that.
you
Where
mean
is
like
most of the money spent?
after payment of rent and card note, and utility bills and groceries and
No.
car
Like,
insurance?
where's most of the money spent? Like, if we're talking about, if we look at the whole pie of all the money spent, where is most of it going? Is it going to life essentials, or is it going to pleasure, or is it going to, required expenses, or education, or transportation? I think we might need to look at that breakdown and see if there is any reporting on that.
You're right. Like what part of our income goes toward discretionary and purchases? How much of it is for like the living, and how much of it is it for pleasure and discretionary? Those would be things to look at, definitely. But whatever that is, even if it is pleasure and discretionary, where are you even spending those dollars?
Yeah. Globe Girl has an important point that I'm not going to touch on because I have very divisive thoughts on this concept of the church. I believe in God, but the church is a problem for me. I'm not sure if churches serve. She says, I'm not sure if churches have as much power today, nor do they play a major role in Black growth.
Ooh, okay.
I'm not going to comment on this. Lisa, you have any thoughts?
Well, I do know, even as we sit here and talk about these things, the dynamics in some of these institutions are changing. The dynamics in the church institution changed when things shut down, because a lot of folks decided that they were going to church online. And I don't know about the support and the giving, but I assume that those things are still in place. And then you have a lot of the older people, like the grandparents and parents, those folks that are supporting the church. And my concern is, like, what about some of these younger generations? Are they as committed? And where are they investing themselves spiritually? And does spiritual investment lead to some of these infrastructural needs that we have? I don't know. Whichever way we need to, somehow we need to make it back to do all these things, through the church, through some other collective body, but we need some collective means by which to organize ourselves so we're all doing some of the same things at the same time.
Yeah, I like that, Lisa. I'm not commenting. Keep it moving. How much is land in Florida? Land in Florida is likely astronomical depending on what segment of Florida. So Lisa and I are both in South Florida, which is nothing like the rest of Florida. So I would say land down here, Lisa, astronomical, because I don't remember seeing anything cheap down here.
Prices are really up high. The average home purchase in South Florida is about 550,000. That's the
What about
average
bare land?
price of a single family home. Land ranges. So land ranges, usually per acre. So I've seen land, I've seen some land $100 an acre, $200 an acre. The closer you are to more commercial areas where you're likely to get more traffic and high visibility, those prices tend to increase in price per square, price per acre, versus like some more remote areas than where people can't get to, or you don't have roads that lead back to vacant fields or lots. You don't have established roads or infrastructure. Those tend to be a little less pricey than what I just mentioned. So it depends on where you're searching for land.
Lisa, are you familiar with land in Georgia? Because I know years ago people were buying stuff dirt cheap in a lot of outlying areas, not in Atlanta, way outside of it, like hour, sometime 2 hours outside of Atlanta. They were getting dirt cheap. Do you know anything about their market now?
Yeah, I think that that kind of thing is still available, and the people who are aware of it, they're capitalizing. The thing is that we're running out of land. We're running out of land across the country. As a matter of fact, people are not talking about it, but I think we have entered a phase of somewhat of a housing crisis in America, because it's very unaffordable for a lot of people just to be able to rent a place to live these days. Prices are exorbitant and they're going up. So, no, I can't say where you can get a good deal. You just have to kind of look around in your locale. There are some good deals out there, but look, it's like in some cases, it's like a needle in that haystack. You got to find it.
I like what Doug is saying, which is part of my bone with the church. Lisa, yes, churches should have set up banks decades ago. I don't remember the statistics. Last I remembered, Black churches deposit 35 million. We didn't say thousand, we didn't say million weekly.
See?
No.
See, that's a lot of buying power. And Sandy, the biggest problem I have is like when churches get a lot of money, and you know how you want to kind of flex, like, yeah, we doing it, we on it. What do? We gonna build a much bigger edifice now. It's gonna be 10 times the size. We're gonna be able to put 5 zillion people in this church.
Look,
really?
I won't be mad at that.
I'm mad at that.
If you are employing people from the community, if you are providing services like legal, medical, educational services, social services within that community, if the dollars that people are giving to the church also translate to supporting so if I have a mega church here, my surrounding community should not be projects, is my thought, right? There should be infusion of things within the community, because too many people are giving money. And some of these churches, it's required. It's not even an option. It's a requirement to be a member of their church.
Right. So, and these churches own development corporations. These churches, they build their own senior housing. They're building their own bigger edifices, taking all that money and building a church 3 times the size as a smaller church. I don't know if that many more people are going to come to the church from the community. So my thing is, why don't churches have businesses? Why doesn't a church have a Black real estate brokerage? Well, that church owns the real estate brokerage. And, between those two entities, it benefits the church. And then the people who work in that brokerage are helping the people in the community to find housing.
Lisa, why are you stopping the pastor from getting his Escalade and his jet? Come on, Lisa.
Look.
I ain't gonna laugh. I went to a church one time, and it was like the gift that they had given to the pastor, I think the deacon or whatever, which was the spouse, gave to the pastor. It was like something like an Escalade or something, or like whatever the highest tier of whatever the vehicle was. I don't remember if it was an Escalade or something. But it was just like, I kept sitting there and I'm like, the church is in a storefront. Did you hear me just say the church is in a storefront?
I've attended a storefront church before. Some of the best church services I ever had was at a storefront, but go ahead.
My thought was the church is in a storefront. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of things that are needed. I don't know necessarily that the Escalade was. You're being fully supported by the church, clearly. You already have multiple luxury vehicles based on the whispers of the people that were sitting next to me. I was like, I was over it. And it's not the first time I'd been to a church that was just like, I don't have time for it. No energy. Doug says local feed and seed stores are where you can get good seeds depending on your location in the country. It's funny. I don't know a local feed and seed store. I need to look and see if there is such a thing near me. And I'm saying within my city. Maybe in the county.
Does Doug do any farming?
I don't know. Doug's going to tell us. He says, Snuggles, some of what you're asking, you will have to research for yourself, like the cost of land. Snuggles likes that. Snuggles says, are you trying to say that people in your community do not understand the importance of advertisement? And if so, can people be taught how important advertising is to the human psyche? I don't think Lisa or I are making any blanket statements about the mindset, the behaviors, the issues in the community. I think what we're saying is there are a lot of issues being brought together. And it's almost like I would describe like a soup or a stew. All of these issues are mixing together and they're creating something. They're creating inequality in the economic marketplace. They're creating inequality in the business space. They're creating inequality in education. They're creating inequality in political framework. It's creating so many different things. So we have to get at what's in that stew and start tearing to that. That's what we have to get to, because it's a lot of issues that are just meshing together. And trust me, advertising is one of the fragments of the issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That all goes with business and understanding the impact to the consumer, the impact to the community, the impact to your family and legacy and generational wealth. It's just a lot.
Yeah, that's true. And we can't stop beating the drum that we're there and that we can make a difference. If people don't hear your voice, they still don't know you're there.
Doug says, I'm in VA, so some Black farmers will sell the produce off their trucks on the side of the road and local farmers markets. I do see that a lot in certain areas here,
yes.
Especially in areas where there's like more land. He said, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and had the privilege of growing up in an actual Black community where all the businesses were Black owned. Nice. It's no longer like that because the next generation didn't continue. And you know what? This generational issue, that is something that he said they didn't continue the previous businesses. That is something that we are drastically at a loss for. Drastically.
That's what you were talking about, Sandy, how in those other communities, like if your father did whatever, if he was a grocer, you're going to be a grocer and your son's going to be a grocer and so on and so forth. That's the difference. So we just let folks walk away from some of these businesses and they died.
Ms. Globe Girl says we have some deeply rooted issues in the Black community, including self-induced trauma. Until those things are addressed, we'll continue to hope and wish with not much progress. I got to put a little star next to this one because Ms. Globe Girl, you are exactly where I feel. I think we're at such a position. It's like, it doesn't matter how much money we start to acquire, how many positions we acquire, how many this, that, and the third. We are not invested psychologically in a lot of the things that we talk about. Psychologically, like the trauma level is real, and it's not always just the outside inflicting something. It's not always the generations before inflicting. Even in the position that we're in right now, some of it is, I would say, self-induced. Some of it is.
For instance, there's four of us on here, or a few of us on here, that all see eye to eye with certain things about our communities, right?
Yeah.
And we know we need to invest. Would five people who don't know each other, such as you, or you and I know each other, but say Snuggles and Doug and Maishan and a few other people, would these folks be willing to get together and put some money up, even with strangers, and invest and begin to grow economically towards something? I think trust is missing.
Yeah.
I think that's a big factor is why we don't work together. Folks work for their common causes. If we can't really visualize that we have common causes, then we will not work together.
I like Snuggles' question. Can you explain to me the dictionary meaning of snitching? So I can't give you the dictionary meaning, but I can say that snitching is telling. That means if something happens, I'm telling. So if it's a crime, I'm reporting it to the police. If it's something in the city that's going wrong, I'm reporting it to that city entity. If somebody just did something in front of me and someone asked me what just happened, I'm telling.
Well, I'm going to tell Snuggles what some defendants told me in court when I was a prosecuting attorney and I had to dismiss the case because I didn't have any witnesses who would come forward. And as that defendant was walking out of the courtroom because he was about to get released because nobody would come up and testify against his criminal butt, he looked at me and said, "Snitches is for bitches."
And you know what? If every time you had a character like that and they were actually snitched on, we would probably have less of those characters. Unfortunately, we have too many of these characters that should have been snitched on a long time ago. and we keep allowing them to be in the system and circulating amongst us and causing havoc. Well, if we had done some more snitching, I think some of our communities would have some level of safety if we get some of these, whatever we want to call them, off the streets. Globe Girl said, I'll snitch my tail off. I'm snitching with you, Globe Girl. We snitching together.
I'm snitching with you too. I probably wouldn't have been a robbery victim several years ago had somebody snitched.
Snitching all day long. If I saw it, Lisa, I'm snitching. Snuggle says, in your community, who commits the most crime? If you don't mind me asking, why is the crime committed? I don't know crime statistics. I think we can probably talk about looking into that maybe on one of our episodes. Maybe we can talk about the impact of that on the community and the economics and business. But I don't know who commits the most crime. I will tell you, locally speaking, I don't really see a difference in the groupings. I think that all of the groups have some say in the crime levels. Although I would say that some of the issues also involve whether police will arrest, whether people actually get charged, whether people actually go through any court process. So I really couldn't say.
And economics, being a former prosecuting attorney, I do know that economics does play a big part in people committing crimes. I mean, I saw there was a lady one time in the grocery store, Sandy. And when it gets so bad where you have to steal groceries, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But this lady had put a rose down in her pants and she was walking through the store dripping blood, trying to make it out past the checkout point. And when they stopped her, it's like, ma'am, we're trying to help you, ma'am. She's like, get off of me.
Ma'am, bring a Ziploc bag next time, ma'am. Bring a plastic bag.
And drop the doggone roast on the floor.
Not the roast.
drop the poor roast. And so the point is that some people are hurting, and that's why they commit crimes. Not everybody, but
so I like Snuggles' question. If you say the people in your community are not a monolith, how does people in other communities work like a monolith when it comes to business? So I don't think that any community is a monolith. I think you're going to have great aspects and poor aspects in any community. I think you're going to have supportive things and negative things in any community. And I can only speak for my community in terms of my experiences. And remember, when I say my community, it's going to mean different things depending on what context we're talking. In some regards, when I say my community, I may be talking about the Black community. In some regards, I'm talking about the Haitian community because that's more of my core than just saying I'm a Black American. I grew up in America. Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in America. But when I went home to a Haitian household, and my mother didn't care about what was going on in the American community. She cared about what's in our house, and in our house, a lot of things weren't going to fly. I was going to go to school. I was going to stay out of trouble. I was going to get an education. I was going to speak properly. I was going to do all these things because she didn't care what I was going to face outside. She cared about what I was going to do from the inside. So when I talk about our community, there's just so many layers. I could be talking about the legal community.
Sandy, I realized that when I moved down to South Florida from up north, because from up north, we were just dealing basically with Black versus white. Yeah. When you come to South Florida, you got a stratified Black. There's all kind of Black. There's from the islands and different groups. And I mean, it's not just Black. Look, you got to say Black who and Black what?
I've had Black people tell me I'm not Black enough. I've had Haitian people tell me I'm not Haitian enough. I've had both groups tell me that I talk white. I've had both groups tell me that I don't satisfy whatever threshold exists in the nonsense that people have to say. I've had all kinds of things said, but I'm going to still tell you I'm Black. I'm going to still tell you I'm Haitian, and you can deal with it how you want. Because at the end of the day, when I'm walking down the street, nobody cares what's the undertone of my life. They see Black face.
Right.
That's it. And sometimes I'm as bright as the white people next to me. They clearly see Black face. It's without question. So, I think it's always funny in talking about communities because sometimes when we have these conversations, there's a thought that there's like an anti-setup sentiment, right? Realistically, with Lisa and I, we don't believe in this anti. We believe in we as a community have to take responsibility for certain things, but the other communities also have to remember the challenges that our community faces. So it's a hand-in-hand conversation that doesn't say one thing, it acknowledges the different components. Because this is like, none of this is like black and white. It's very much gray. It's very much gray. It's not black and white.
And remember, we only got our civil rights in this country in 1964. So that's not that damn long ago. Before that, I mean, we were victims of all type of racism and discrimination, officially, unofficially, up, down, in, out. We experienced it in this country. So, we're just now getting on the road to some equality things where we can begin to get ourselves together.
All right, there's a sprinkle of folks watching us. I can't believe we're at about an hour and 30. Guys, I appreciate you so much for tuning in. Lisa and I always love having these great conversations. Please be sure to click subscribe so that you are able to be notified the next time we have something. Click the notification bell. We'd love for you to click that like button and share this video, because these are important conversations we definitely have to have. Miss Globe Girl says, also, it's mostly every man for himself. No sense of true networking or simply just caring. If you can't do anything for me, keep it moving. I'm a firm believer in that. Lisa and I talk about this a lot when it comes to us coming together as collectives, us supporting one another. And it's kind of like, I'm not going to weigh on relying on individuals or groups of people to support. If they're not going to, I just keep it moving at all times. I'm not going to wait around and expect something that I may not get.
Because we don't have time. Like we are a progressive people. We've always been a progressive people, moving forward, innovative, doing the next, but that's who we are. So we don't have time to wallow in the past and even our own maltreatment over time. We have to rise above that. And that's who we are. And we have to remember that, and we'll be okay. But we also have to remember that we have to start working together. It doesn't mean we're a monolith and we're all alike, but we have to find some common denominators and begin to work off that from a trust point of view, so that we have common purpose, common desires, common goals.
So Snuggle says, do you all listen to Maslow's hierarchy of needs? If so, would you all use the concept of what is talked about in the hierarchy of needs when it comes to building community? And Snuggles goes on to say, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory of motivation which states that 5 categories of human needs dictate an individual's behavior. Those needs are psychological needs, safety needs, love and belonging needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization needs. It's interesting that you mentioned this hierarchy of needs, because even as I'm looking at this list of psychological, safety, love and belonging, esteem, there's so many factors that play into each of these core things. And like we talked about, us not being a monolith, right? So you may have one family that can actually address these issues, right? You may have another family, but you're always going to have collectives of individuals that are not able to get these needs satisfied for whatever the challenge may be. And so while I think in theory, a lot of these things are great in theory, but unfortunately, theory doesn't always dictate the reality of life, right? There are factors that are kind of out of our handle, not out of our control, but out of our handle, because there are a lot of other things that come into play. That's why whenever I think about any of these issues, whether it's coming up with a theory to address an issue, whether it's looking at what we can do in our community or with our businesses, everything is based on circumstance. And with each circumstance is a pile of issues that come along with it. So, I definitely think it's something to look into in having these collective conversations and talking about how we can make improvements in our community. And Snuggle says, can you give us the places where the land is less pricey, if you don't mind asking?
Snuggles, reach out to me. I'll be glad to help you with land in Florida. I can point you out to land and land prices anywhere in the state of Florida. So you can reach out to me, Lisa Crawford 954@gmail.com, and we can definitely have that conversation.
Awesomeness. My Sean Denise in the building, just hit 10,000 subscribers.
Woo, my God. Congratulations. You are working your magic, ma'am. Loving it.
I love watching my Sean Denise content. I mean, always gives me something to be entertained and educated all at the same time. And she definitely hits on a lot of issues where, when we think about some of the societal issues that we experience in our community, some of it is, some things my Sean is hitting on is like, if you really think about it, all of these little things form that little stew that I talked about, right? All these little things mixed together, you're going to have some stew forming. And
Oh
until you
yeah.
start to attack those individual ingredients in that stew, you're always going to be stirring up the same
Oh
stuff
yeah.
over and over.
I saw
Um,
I saw a sister on YouTube the other day who had on some hot pants and a little tight shirt with like a whole lot of extra cleavage, and the hot pants were so tight, and her thighs were like maybe three persons' thighs on each leg. I mean, just huge. But the point was, she has so much confidence, and I just wonder what my Sean Denise would have said about this sister. Like, was it raunchy or was it like attractive because of her attitude and her confidence about her body? So I like listening to my Sean Denise because she gives her thoughts on, Black women and some of the different
Unfiltered.
things. Oh, unfiltered. I love that about her.
So Snuggle says, are you saying the church can be used to help build a strong infrastructure for a bank? And if so, how can that be done with mindset that you said that is not monolithic? So we're talking about two different things here. So one is talking about the role of a church in a community. And one thing to understand with some churches, so we're not going to make this a blanket statement. We're going to say there's a good handful of churches in our Black community as a whole that have a large economic influence within their community.
Yeah.
And so, with them bringing in the dollars that they are bringing in on a regular basis, it would be suggested that they would have an impact on specifically the community that they're in and the
Housing.
individuals that are in that community, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're making the money from the community and you are in a community, then there is some infrastructure that you could impact. Now, are you the only entity in that community that should have an impact? No. But if you are bringing in more money than the whole community combined, then I would say that the church does have a responsibility, like any business that is reaping the benefits of being within whatever the community is.
Right, because I'd rather see a house being built a house a year versus redoing a whole church and making it from just a regular old church on the street corner to a mega church. You know what I mean? It's just like, why are we going there versus investing in the people when these folks need a place to live and they come into the church because they need housing? So, I mean, we have to get smarter and look at the needs of our community and begin to meet that. And the church can do that. The church can begin to do that. So, yeah, it's not anything that's going to happen overnight, but we have to get outside the box and these traditional roles and think, what are the actual needs that the people need today, and how can we help with those current needs? And real quick, as far as Maslow's hierarchy?
Yeah.
As far as that's concerned, I think we got the basics levels down. We eat, we sleep, we have shelter, we have a lot of conveniences. So we got that part down. What we don't have in is the sweat equity, the hard work, thinking about more than just ourselves. That's the part that we have to rise to collectively.
Miss Globe Girl is talking about a Cuban link chain. I can't even imagine. So Snuggle says, does the churches pay taxes? If not, how can the church teach you what you need to do? Create an infrastructure that can help you in the tax endeavor also. I'm not familiar with church, rules, regulations, and the laws that go with churches. I do know that a lot of churches have certain tax advantages and benefits depending on how they're structured.
Yeah.
I believe so. Doug is saying good morning to my Sean, and he's over there multitasking. Snuggle says, we'll teach a generation on how to continue the family business or what steps needs to be taken to keep a thriving business in the family. Do you all have any ideas? Yeah, I have a lot of ideas. And one is the concept of building business and understanding financial literacy. Yes, that should start from home. But if it can't, if we are having to go to school every day for over 8 hours per day, I would think that our school systems, and again, this comes from working on the school board people, working on school administration, working on our government to strengthen what actually happens in schools. But tech, financial literacy, and understanding of wealth and wealth generation should be taught in schools. It's not. Yeah. But that's something that I think should be included in the curriculum in school. And then as far as the community, I think churches and community organizations should be tasked as well. You're getting money from the government. So there should be programs within the community to support those types of needs.
And there are things out there. There's an organization called SCORE, SCORE, and those are a lot of retired business people, and they actually help people with their businesses. They give them insight. You can get a mentor through that organization, SCORE. So if a family is trying to set up a business and learn some of the dynamics to make that business successful, I think it's important to connect with business mentors. So I would recommend SCORE as one. The Urban League, in several communities, they have different opportunities to learn about, to have business training, some of them, and helping people write budgets, helping people prepare business plans, which is very vital to starting a business. So I would encourage anyone wanting to maintain or start a family business to check with their local organizations like that Urban League, United Way, to find out what opportunities they have for small businesses. There are things that are out there. We just need to continue to grow these things. Certainly, Sandy and I are here in this space as coaches to help people in their businesses if they need specific help and they need someone to guide them or help develop their plans, and help oversee the implementation. We can help with that. So that's why we put ourselves in this space as business people, because we want to help those who are in need. We do it as coaches, but we do it in general by what we're doing right now, just sitting here talking about how we can grow and develop. And it takes all of us, like we're participating now. So thank you for all of those comments.
So Snuggle says, how can trust be developed with the few of us in this room? What steps needs to be taken? I mean, I think a lot of things need to happen in terms of developing conversations that will lead to action items. When we start talking about buying Black, a lot of times people take it as, well, don't buy anything else. No, it just means be more intentional in your buying, be more intentional in your selections, be more intentional in allowing some economic stability for a community that is still trying to find a footing when it comes to the money part. So I think it's important to look at that. Let's see a couple of things more. We're almost done. I helped start an investment club in another sector of YouTube. The goal was to get 5,000 people, and once or twice per year, the goal was to donate $20, which would equal 100,000. Then we would invest into manufacturing. And those.
How'd that go, Doug? How did that go? Is it still happening?
He says one of the founders' wife was Chinese, and then the next thing you know, the Chinese took over. So I left the group. We were going to start a toilet paper company and manufacture synthetic hair. Oh, Doug. Oh my gosh, I have thoughts on that. People in the Haitian community, what are the rules and regulations that are known between the people in your community? So being that many Haitians will say I'm not really Haitian enough, I don't know that I can speak fully on the rules and regulations. What I will say is Haitian people are very prideful people. Haitian people are very, we have to work at the bone to get what we need. There are people that don't like the concept of public benefits and public advantages. They're just very, very hardworking people who many have come here and opened businesses and bought property and have transacted money within their community, but they're not always seen as the norm, right? Oftentimes people see Haitians and they think immigrant, they think came on a boat, they think taking advantage of American culture. And unfortunately, that can't be further from the truth. You'll find Haitian people in the backdrop in the hotel industry, in the restaurant industry, in manufacturing industry, just working. So, I don't know if I can speak to really rules and regulations. I can speak from my experience as a child and as an adult. People in the Haitian community, what are the things everyone knows that are considered to be respectable? And also are the things that are not done because it will be looked at as disrespect. Ooh, I can't even talk about this in enough time. And we don't even have enough time to talk about that. But I will promise you, Snuggles, we're going to do a topic on communities And we'll talk a little bit about this type of thing. And I'll bring in some folks who are more expert than me, because I'm considered more of an American Haitian than a Haitian American.
Sandy, do you think that maybe sometime if we can get into one of these community groups and talk about their ideas about keeping the Black dollar circulating within the community, maybe we can actually go out and talk to some of the community folks and bring that back to our channel?
I mean, yeah, we'd have to do some circulating. That's the only way that we can have these conversations with more action items and start to look at communities that are trying to get it right. That would help. Does the Spanish community worry about what goes on in the Asian community? If so, can you give an example? I would say the only impression that I would have of the Spanish community is they're intentional. I don't think it's a worry about other communities. I think it's intentionality. And I think that's something that we in the Black community are missing. We're not intentional. And so the Spanish community doesn't exclude other communities. They just are intentional about supporting their community.
Yeah, and they seem and Latinos seem very proud to be Latinos. So
yeah, maintaining culture.
It's almost like from the James Brown era in the 60s, where Black people say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. It's kind of that thing. But it's more, to me, it's more esoteric than skin color. It goes like your ethics, your work ethics, your ethics for progress. I mean, we got to get some common denominators and say we're about this. It's skin color plus more.
So as we wrap up, because we're going to be in the last few moments here, because I know that we have to get back to real life now, get off YouTube life and get into real life. Doug says the Black community actually owned more during segregation. The conversation about the disparities between what the Black community has now and what they had back then is always striking to me. Because at a point in time when we were with less rights and opportunities, we were more productive economically. And I think there's a lesson to be learned from this. That's why, the pushback that I gave you, Lisa, earlier about, where we came from and where we are now and why we have the problems we have. Part of the problems we have is foundations that were laid were eliminated along the path. And now we're operating in a different sense, but we're not recognizing how privileged we are in comparison to where we came from.
And it makes me sick to my stomach that we have lost, as a people, we have lost 90% of our real estate wealth since the end of slavery in this country. We've lost 90%. Can you believe our ancestors did better than us in land accumulation than what we're able to do today? What is wrong with this picture?
Well, I'm going to tell you just a little thought about it as we wrap up. We did a poor job transitioning wealth, transferring wealth, building legacy. It was all about getting things, getting opportunities, getting rights. But when it was time to educate the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, there was a loss. Because when one generation didn't have, they gave the next everything. Then the next generation came along and really did not much of anything, little thing here and there. Then the generation that comes after them, well, they're more well off than the generations before them. Nothing accomplished. Little trickles here and there. So the large push where we came from and the little things that happened along the way, I feel like led us to be a more privileged society. And I'm not speaking of us as a whole. I'm saying that there's a large chunk of the Black community that is privileged, whether they are on the poorer end or on the richer end, because there were benefits that were provided in our community that in many ways hurt our community. And there are many opportunities that were presented in our community that in many ways hurt our community because it created a disconnect, separated Black men from Black women, separated Black people from supporting their own, separated Black people from concepts of economic growth within the Black community to seeing other ice being colder. That's where we're coming from right now.
Yeah, and that's a political function too. Like the politics works best when you segment and break everybody down into groups and have the smaller groups fighting each other. That's definitely political in this country. And a lot of Americans have not been able to rise above that, unfortunately. Right. Because if we forget about some of these artificial barriers that politicians have created, we would actually come together and we would all kick their butts out of office, the ones that aren't working for all of us. So, yeah, that's a very interesting point, too.
I think we have to educate ourselves on where we came from, but also recognizing how privileged we are.
Yeah.
We are extremely privileged and we have endless opportunities, but many of us are squandering the opportunities. Many of us are taking advantage of benefits that we shouldn't still be taking advantage of 20 years later. 15. You look at certain people that are on like public assistance for 20 years. My Sean talks about this all the time on her channel. 20 years? Shouldn't there be a scaling out of the system into normalcy? Like, how did we get to that point? But I'm not going to carry us into that. Snuggle says, if someone has been progressive, what are the examples that would be shown? I really don't understand the whole progressive thing. I think we'll have to circle back on that, but I really couldn't respond to that.
Well, I'll say it really quickly. I know we got to go, and I know I have meetings, but I would say progressive meaning that there is growth toward more economic, a stronger economic base. There's the ability to build more, say, schools, hospitals, maybe have your own police force within your own community. Those infrastructural changes will grow when there's money that has been invested. So you will be able to see those signs of progressiveness within communities when they happen. You'll know it when you see it.
Let's see. It doesn't take much to start a credit union. I believe all you need is 500 members to start. Trust and believe, Doug. I think there's so many things that we could do in our community. Much of it is about being intentional. I don't think we intentionally form collectives. I don't think we intentionally look to what the collective buying power is that we have, or the collective economic power that we actually have. I don't even think we think about those things, even though it's in our faces every day. The Spanish and the Asian community work together in some industries, especially the restaurant industries. Man, there's a Spanish restaurant on every corner in my neighborhood. All kinds, Peruvian, Cuban, you name it, all kinds in my neighborhood. Same with the Asian restaurants, there's all kinds. Same with Mediterranean restaurants, there's all kinds. I might be able to count a sprinkle of Black restaurants, and typically they're closed within a period of time.
And we better be careful because we don't even know really what Black food is anymore. Like, I know when you say Spanish food or Latin food, I know tacos, I know tamales, I know empanadas. But when you say Black food, you can't just claim fried chicken. Okay, because everybody loves fried chicken
and watermelon.
You can't just claim fried chicken. Everybody loves fried chicken and watermelon. So what is Black food? So we really do need to do some redefining in the modern day here.
You're making me laugh. There was an elementary school that decided to do a Black History Month event, and they had fried chicken and watermelon. I almost wanted to go down there and slap somebody.
I want to slap somebody just off you saying that.
Doug said something changed during the boomer generation. And you know what, Doug? I would love for us to have a conversation. I think we're going to do that as another show. I would love for us to have a conversation about the transition between the generations and how it impacted us in the Black community.
Let's do
because
that.
I think that we had some strides that were made, right? But there was a point in time where the disconnect happened and we've never been the same. And it's like right now, there are some people waking up to this idea that we're our own worst enemy in terms of not tapping into the access that we have. I'm not saying we have all the opportunities. I'm not saying we have all the dollars, but we have access.
$1.4 trillion worth of access. We have it. Not in my pocket, but we have it.
So guys, we're going to try to cut this at this point in time because it is about almost 2 hours. This is a rarity for us. We rarely go this far, but this was an amazing conversation. I thank you, Snuggles, Doug, my Sean, Denise, Rigo, Miss Globe Girl, each and every one of you guys that have tapped into this conversation. We're going to have to close out at this time. Please be sure to follow us on Instagram. We also have some live conversations on there periodically where we talk about issues just like we did today. We are on Instagram at B is for BIZ. And you can also support LearnBiz, the podcast, on our Cash App. It's just the $ and the word LearnBiz. We thank those who have supported us to date, and it allows us to continue to do something that we truly enjoy, which is supporting Black business. And again, not excluding others, but supporting and promoting and educating Black business. Thank you so much for each and every one of you for tuning in today. We will recircle, and Snuggles, we're going to definitely touch on some of the questions that you have and probably just do a whole session on some of these specific issues that you mentioned. But thank you so much for your participation
thank
today.
you for the topics. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. So we have to run because I got to do some lawyering today, and I got another thing I got to do. So I hope you guys have a great day. Enjoy your weekend, and catch us again on Tuesday morning, same time, same place. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.